So a friend of mine asked a really perceptive question the other day, just going through these videos together and trying to put it into practice. He said, so are you saying, Rob, that it's almost good to be unprepared so that when you have these interactions with people out and about, Jesus sort of makes up the difference and he's more powerful for you because you're unprepared? Let's just clarify a couple of things here. First of all, what do we mean by being prepared? Being prepared to do it or have something already prepared? I think there's a difference. Let's look at Peter's letter, his first letter, chapter 3. He says, always be ready to give an answer to those who ask for the reason for the hope that you've got. I don't think Peter there is saying always have a ready-made answer. He says always be ready to give an answer. And then he says for the reason for the hope, and the reason at the end of the day is Christ. That's the difference. I know him, I know he's real. I don't know everything about him, but I know him enough. I know I've seen him, I've felt him, I'm assured of him, and what he says is true, and I've lent on his promises in difficult times. Let's also look at the context that Peter's speaking into there in chapter 3. He's specifically talking about times of adversity and hardship. So that's challenging in itself. Why would people ask you for the hope that you've got? Perhaps they notice when they see your faith worked out in everyday life that you're handling difficult situations differently. You're handling difficult people differently. Or when you're not doing it so well, you're the quickest to apologize. So Peter's assuming that people are noticing these things and saying, I've seen people walk through those sorts of times, but not quite so steady as you are, or honestly, or humbly, etc., etc. So be challenged by that one. Certainly we can be. But let's go back to this idea of having ready-made answers. In this day and age, people are savvy. They want to know that what you're talking about isn't something you've just learned from a textbook. It's something that you know for yourself and know to be true. And we've got to be very careful of second-hand stuff that we haven't researched and dug into ourselves, that we haven't experienced ourselves, that we haven't lived ourselves. Let's go back to Roland Allen's book, which is so helpful, The Spontaneous Expansion of the Church. And he says one of the great virtues, the language is old again, but I'll explain it as we go. One of the great virtues of spontaneously expressing our faith is that in expressing our truth to another person, especially in our early days, we find out our own ignorance of many aspects of our truth. And then being eager to learn, we inquire further for ourselves. We search diligently for answers to difficulties and difficult questions which arise. So again, we don't need to know everything. In fact, it's very compelling because we're not talking about a subject, we're talking about our experience of a person, the risen Lord. When we say, I don't know, really good question. In fact, I'm going to go and find out. That honours the person you're speaking to, that what they've asked is such a good question and an important one. And obviously to them, otherwise they wouldn't be asking it. And there might be something going on in their life behind their question, which is why they're asking it. But you're saying, you know, I don't know. I don't want to jump to conclusions. I don't want to just spout out something I don't know for sure or something that I've heard from somebody else. This is too important. I'm going to go away. I'm going to find out. And actually, the more conversations we have like that, the more these questions tend to have a pattern to them. Of course, then, in doing the research and doing the digging and finding this stuff out firsthand for ourselves, we will get, inverted commas, better at doing it. But only in the sense that we're getting clearer, we're getting more concise, it's showing our testimony and answering particular objections that people might have in today's world to the Christian faith. It doesn't start with the ready-made answers and getting ourselves to a place where I feel so equipped now I can go out and share my faith. No, it's in sharing your faith with people, in coming up against difficult questions, that we're having to speak of stuff that we know is true for ourselves. Don't know everything, but this I know for ourselves. And also we're left with these gaps that we can then go and do our own research into. And also we're more likely to be listening to the actual question that we're being asked. If we've got ready-made answers, it's so easy to go, oh, I've got a good answer for that. Just can't wait for him to pause breath. Then I'm going to jump in with my perfect, well-reasoned argument. Well, Paul in the scriptures is dead against that. He says specifically, we didn't come with good-sounding arguments and clever words, wise and persuasive words. We speak of Christ and him crucified, what Paul knew to be true. So actually listen to the questions that are being asked. Ask some follow-up questions, gentle ones, that might draw out why they're asking that question and what's behind them. And again, let's think about this. The whole context here is it assumes that our life is visible enough, our faith is visible enough to other people, that they might see how we're going through this thing that we call life, which is at many times a very, very difficult thing, but doing it in such a way that it seems to point beyond what we're going through to something much more sure, much more certain, and much more exciting than anything this world can offer. Lots of love, guys. Hope that helps.